Welcome everyone, this is Tactical Lich here, and today we are back to the battlefields of Total War Warhammer 2 with Doomsage sending in this replay with the High Elf versus the Empire. Doomsage leading the High Elf units. We have a front line of Rangers backed up by a couple Dragon Princes, while at the back we have a whole regiment of all these Illyrian Reaver archers, 5 of them in fact, hiding in the forest. And also we have a single Imric on a horse, as well as a Mage of Life bringing Dwellers Below, as well as regrowth for the healing for the Dragon Princes and Imric. Now with the Rangers, those anti-infantry dual-wielding swords are great at dealing with all these Empire state troops, but today the state troops are a little bit different, with Spearmen of gold chevrons. Basically upgraded all the way to the highest tier. They are the Empire's elites. They have a massive boost in their melee defense stats, and hopefully they will hold a little longer against the High Elf Elite. Now at the back we have a couple mortars, as well as a couple Empire Knights guarding the mortars, and in the forest we have a couple Demigryph with halberds. Those armor-piercing anti-large will be great at dealing with Dragon Princes if they can get the charge. Now for the spell support department, we have a single Jade Wizard who is also supporting the Chevrons in the skies, as the Mage of Life providing those healing will be crucial in topping up the health, allowing Chevrons as well as the Demigryph Knights to stay in top shape. Now let's get the battle started, as the mortars are roaring into life with their explosions. These mortars are not normal mortars either, with 3 gold chevrons on them, fully upgraded. They actually have really good accuracy, but it seems that the High Elf player did a bit of a dodging maneuver, avoided some of those mortar fire, and not really taking much damage from Rangers, especially with their loose formation mitigating explosive damage. And now with a bit of foot slogging, finally both armies have reached the front line, colliding on the top of the hill. Now a massive blast from the mortars took out quite a bit of health from the Rangers, but with the charge they still seem to be doing decent damage to the upgraded Spearmen with shields. The stat buffs from the chevrons are not exactly doing what they need to do to hold back all these Rangers, as the spears, they seem to be holding a little longer but still taking significant damage from all the Ranger units, especially with this Spearman unit being double teamed by 2 Rangers. Now on the Empire's right flank, the cavalry engagement has started. The High Elf cavalry using their lives to lay down a trap on these Demigryph Knights. The Illyrian Reaver archers pinning down all these Demigryphs, allowing the High Elf player to drop a massive Dwellers Below, taking all the health from all these Demigryph Knights. Massive damage and really juicy for an AoE spell, while the Jade Wizard is now pinned down by a bunch of Heralds of the Wind. Empire Knights trying to rescue him, but the Rangers are charging forward, trying to block off some of the Empire Knights, allowing the Rangers and the Reavers to isolate and finish off the Jade Wizard. As for Chevrons, who does have the aerial advantage, he has dropped onto Imric, but Imric slips away with the cover from the Dragon Princes, while the Demigryph Knights, who took massive damage from the Dwellers Below, have been charged by the Dragon Princes, suffering heavy casualties from the charge impact, being pushed off before they can be healed by the regrowth. While more Dragon Princes are now circling around, going into combat, trying to surround all these damaged Demigryphs as well as Chevrons. Some Empire Knights are following up, charging them in the rear, but the regrowth is topping up their health and also keeping their vigor high, allowing them to fight back decently against the Empire Knights. Still, with all the Empire Knights surrounding these Dragon Princes, they have been taking some damage, and now their leadership is wavering, so more Dragon Princes will be cycle charging into the fray, trying to save these elite heavy cav of the High Elf units, while the Illyrian Reaver archers have been circling around the battlefield, shooting up a bunch of these Empire spears, allowing the Rangers to clean them up. Yes, of course, there are some Rangers taking some damage from the mortar fire, but with the Spearmen buckling, some Rangers are now in the backline shutting down some of these mortar crews, while the Empire Knights, the Empire Cavalry, are now dwindling in numbers as the Demigryphs are being focused down by all those Dragon Princes and Dwellers Below, and now the Empire Knights are running thin as well, with double Dragon Princes surrounding them, more Rangers flooding in, while the Jade Wizard of the Empire roster is now being shut down by multiple Illyrian Reaver archers. Even the Mage of Life is now coming in to keep him routed, and hopefully he will be shattered, completely shutting down the healing for the Empire army, especially for Karl Franz. While at the back, the mortars have been continuously firing. One of them got shut down, pushed off by the Rangers, and now the second one is also falling to the same fate, as there are no backline protection to intercept the Rangers from charging them down. Now back to the front line, the mortars have been doing some decent damage against the Rangers, and some of these spears actually have been able to held back all these Rangers, buying time for the mortars to do the damage. But unfortunately, the mortars are now being silenced, while the High Elves have been keeping up with the skirmish missile pressure, using their Illyrian Reaver archers, shooting down all these Empire Knights, while Karl Franz have been constantly psycho-charging, dropping down from the air, swooping into the heavy cavalry, the Dragon Princes. Being the only remaining armor-piercing unit on the battlefield, Karl Franz is desperately trying to shut down all these Dragon Princes, but he can only do so much, as the High Elves still have the dominating mobility pressure on the battlefield. And of course, Karl Franz is unable to catch all these swift and agile Illyrian Reaver archers. Imrik himself seems to be routed off, nowhere to be found on the battlefield, probably shut down by Karl Franz, the High Elves losing their lord in battle. And now the balance of power is actually pretty even, as the Rangers are now being routed by the charge of Empire Knights, while the elite state troops, the elite spears of the Empire, are now regrouping with their upgraded leadership, preparing for their last stand. The Illyrian Reaver archers seems to be running low in terms of ammo. They have to be shooting into the targets that matter, and Karl Franz is definitely one of those targets. As he is big, he is huge, yes, he has heavy armor, but all those missiles will add up, especially now that there is no more healing, since the Jade Wizard has been sniped out by the High Elves earlier. So Empire loses all its magic support. So all that's left for Empire are these melee troops, the Spears, the Empire Knights, once again relying on their trusty steel and faith. And a reckless charge from all these Illyrian Reaver archers left them caught up on the anti-large infantry. The spearmen have been successful in pushing off all these Illyrian Reaver archers. Of course, they probably will regroup and come back for another round, especially with those missiles continuously shooting down all these lightly armored Empire troops. But Karl Franz and the Empire Knights will be a bit of a tough nut to crack with the lack of AP options. After all, they do have a pretty heavy metal shell with their 100 armor, 110 on the regular Empire Knights. But with the spearmen now isolated from the rest of the army, Doomsage is able to capitalize on this opening, using those mobility advantage to cycle charge, rear charge, and flank charge all these spearmen units, and with the leadership debuff as well as the shock damage from all those charges from the cavalry, the spearmen's leadership buckles, and now they are retreating from combat, leaving only a single Empire Knight unit to support the fight of Karl Franz. The Rangers, they are pretty healthy when they got first charged by the Empire Knights, so they are still holding in this flank despite being combined double teamed by Empire Knights as well as the Karl Franz, buying time for these Illyrian Reaver archers to come back and start raining their shots into the backs of these Empire Knights. And now the Dragon Princes, one single unit remaining, is lowering their lances, charging straight into these Empire Knights. A healing is coming in as well, hoping to sustain their HP in the fight against Karl Franz. And that regrowth is really clutch, refreshing their vigor, topping up their HP, keeping the Dragon Princes alive and their leadership high to stay in combat, successfully breaking off the remaining Empire Knights. And Karl Franz is now truly alone. It is pretty much Karl Franz against the world, as the High Elves have now gained the upper hand in terms of numbers as well as the balance of power. Though a single tattered unit of Demigryph Knights returning to battle, barely sustaining their leadership, charging straight into the Illyrian Reaver archers, doing massive damage to their opponents, but they themselves are wavering from the damage sustained in combat, and as a second unit of Illyrian Reaver archers charges into combat, these Demigryph Knights can no longer hold in battle, wavering, and now they are broken, leaving the spearmen alone, while over here Karl Franz is still fighting among a bunch of rangers, but he's sorely needed in this battle over here, as the last of the infantry support are now being finished off by the High Elf forces, leaving behind only a tattered Empire Knights. And Karl Franz, being a single entity surrounded by enemy units, has taken some noticeable attrition damage in this melee grind. Now, the Dragon Princes who have received a regrowth have now regained some of their health, charging in, finishing off the last of the spearmen, while the Mage of Life is trying to chase off, making sure these Demigryph Knights no longer come back. And so Karl Franz will be dropping in, hoping to catch these Dragon Princes, which is a decent fight for him, as he does have massive armor-piercing weapon strength, as well as a higher speed to catch up with these Dragon Princes, taking down a few models here and there with every swipe, combined with the Deathclaw Terror effect, successfully routing all these High Elf Elite Cavalry. But now, what he needs to face are these multiple Ranger units and the remaining Illyrian Reaver Archers. He is still trying to chase off all these Dragon Princes, as he does not want them to come back, but missing the charge right there might be a big issue here, as the charge bonus is not fully utilized, while the Dragon Princes are now surrounding Karl Franz, keeping him pinned down, allowing all these Illyrian Reaver Archers as well as the Rangers to come in for a rear charge, using those charge bonus to bring down Deathclaw, doing some chip damage here and there, and buying time for the full health Mage of Life to come back from chasing off all those Demogryphs. Of course, Karl Franz is still a powerful melee combatant, successfully routing off a lot of these remaining units, actually almost all of the remaining units of the High Elves, leaving Karl Franz a one-on-one fight against the Life of Mage, which is no easy task for Karl Franz, who is now heavily damaged. Sure, Franz can probably try to 1v1 the Life Mage, but he's probably better off to go after the routing units. The balance of power was not in favor of the Empire, so the Empire player has to use everything they can to get back in the game, especially with breaking off all these isolated forces of the High Elf army. Especially with them regrouped, Karl Franz have to finish them off before taking on the Life Mage, so as to prevent any intervention in the final duel between the characters. But it seems that Karl Franz is taking a few seconds too long to break off these High Elf units, giving the Life Mage an opening to charge in from behind. A decisive strike at the rear of Karl Franz and Deathclaw, striking fear into the Emperor of Men. Franz breaks, and no more units remain for the Empire army. A big thanks to Doomsage for sending in this replay. Let's have a look at the army performances. We have the Rangers doing some pretty good damage against the Spearmen. Although, not all of them can earn back their value, only one of them really getting a lot of value from surrounding Karl Franz and also cutting down the mortars, surviving till the endgame, getting 3 chevrons. But the Dragon Princes, damage dealers, absolutely getting amazing value today with all those heals, the regrowth, keeping their health alive, allowing them to do some decent damage in the late game, but especially able to catch the Demogryph Knights with the dwellers below and then charging them down with the Dragon Princes, nuking those units, really helped them to get the value from cutting down the elite Empire Cavalry. While the Illyrian Reaver Archers, not all of them getting back their value either, due to them not having a lot of good targets to deal with today. With all the heavy armor on the Empire Cavalry, their missile damage is a little bit limited, and they can't really effectively run down the spears either with the buffed up melee defense due to those chevron upgrades. However, sacrificing one of them to nuke 2 Demogryph Knights with dwellers below was a great option, successfully limiting the effectiveness of the Empire Cavalry. While the Herald of the Wind was able to run down the Jade Wizard of the Empire roster, while the High Elf army themselves were able to keep the Mage of Life alive, providing those healing and dwellers below to the army to support getting some nice value, not only from the dwellers below but also running into the rear of Karl Franz, getting some nice charge damage. Although Imrik himself was not able to get too much damage done because, well, Imrik on a horse was not exactly a match for Karl Franz, due to Karl Franz able to get a drop onto the Dragon Prince using those charge bonus abilities, weapon damage buffs, successfully sniping out Imrik, who doesn't have much tankiness himself. Now for the Empire army, the Spearmen not doing a lot of damage. Their main duty was to just hold back the High Elf forces, buying time for the mortars to do the damage, but unfortunately mortars with gold chevrons doesn't exactly have the most damage output still, due to the fact that upgrades to artillery actually doesn't boost their missile damage, they only buff their accuracy and reload speed. So the damage is still limited as they are unable to use up all their ammo and get caught by the Rangers, shutting down the artillery units. Although the Empire Knights were able to get some really good damage done as they were able to charge into the rears of the Dragon Princes, however the Demogryph Knights not so much, as one of them got nuked by the dwellers below and got charged by the Dragon Princes, being forced off the battlefield early, while the other one able to survive till the endgame, although still the Empire Cavalry overall did a really good job running down the lightly armored Rangers as well as surrounding the Dragon Princes. Now for the spellcasting department, Jade Wizard mostly there for the healing, but unfortunately got routed off early, so unable to get back too much value, while Carl Franz was able to snipe out Emmerich and using those armor-piercing weapon damage to drop down some of the Dragon Princes, but unfortunately not quite able to pull back the game, as the gold chevrons doesn't seem to do a lot in this battle. A bit of a wasted funds, I would say, on the mortars especially. And yeah, that's basically it for today's battle. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the replay. The next big patch for Total War Warhammer 3 is dropping in a few hours, and I'm excited to play the game once again. I have not been playing too much Total War Warhammer 3 due to its current state being rather imbalanced, and a lot of functions are rather broken right now, so it was not exactly the greatest game to play. I've been more addicted to Elden Ring recently, but with the next big patch, the 1.1 patch coming in, I will be back to play more Total War Warhammer land battles. I probably won't be playing too much Domination. Domination was not exactly my main thing, so my focus will still be on land battles. And yeah, stay tuned for more multiplayer replays in the future. Hit the like and subscribe, and get notified every time I upload a new video. And if you have any replays that you want to share, feel free to drop by my Discord or send me an email with the replay file attached. I'll be sure to check them out. And yeah, that's basically it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.